Welcome to the Self-Discovery Files, a place for reflection, challenge, and becoming who you're meant to be. I'm your host, Dylan Phipps. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at @TheDylanPhipps for more daily insights. Enjoy. All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Self-Discovery Files. Today's episode 6, it's about something that I had to learn the hard way. Okay? And I'm going to give it a blunt statement right here at the beginning of the episode. Validation will poison your dreams of becoming a leader or even a self-sufficient individual. Okay, people think that validation is harmless. They think that wanting approval is just quote unquote being human, right? But validation, like real external validation, it is one of the quietest poisons because it feels good going down, right? It feels like confidence, but it kills you from the inside out. And I don't say that dramatically. Okay? I don't say that it will poison your dreams of becoming a leader and even a self-sufficient individual. I don't say that, to have this big overbearing feeling. I say that from experience. The first time I realized I was doing things for approval was early in high school. Back then, everything that I did felt like a performance. My achievements that I was, striving for, how I carried myself when I was, in public, even the decisions that I made about what I had wanted in life, and whether it was teachers, teammates, or my family, I kept looking around the room, almost checking their faces before I made a move, right? I needed someone to nod at me before I could trust my own direction. And needing validation feels like this hole that someone else has to fill. It's like this tension in the chest, right? Like you're holding your breath waiting for someone else to exhale for you. Like you're and I think this is the best example that I always turn to. It's like you're walking across a long bridge, but you can't keep going until someone assures you the next plank will break. You don't move because you know it's stable, right? You move because someone else told you it is. That's how that approval addiction works. It makes you outsource your courage. And in today's day and age, this generation is drowning in it. Social media has turned validation into essentially a dopamine casino. And people wake up and immediately ask the world, am I enough today? In likes, comments, DMs, posts, right? Girls fishing for attention, guys posting thirst traps or fake flexes, right? People performing different identities based depending on who's watching or who they're around, not being different versions of yourself, being inauthentic versions of yourself, right? And the worst part of this is that it works. It works just long enough to keep you addicted. Right? One comment or one DM or one compliment, and suddenly you feel alive, right? It's that little surge. It hits. It's like a drug, but then it fades. And when it fades, you feel emptier than you did before you got it. And that emptiness is why people keep chasing more. Right? I know because I lived in that trap. There was a period in my life where I talked to tons of girls, literally hundreds. And I'm not proud of it, and I wasn't proud of it, but I was addicted to the attention, right? The compliments, the snaps, the all the messages and flirting, that gave me a high. In the moment, it felt like power, right? It felt like proof that I mattered. But here's the truth. The hard truth is that not one of those compliments changed anything about my life. Not one single compliment made me a better man. Not one single compliment made me happier the next morning. And not one made me more secure, more grounded, and more confident. And the crazy thing is, you don't even realize how empty that cycle is, and how just totally abysmal that cycle is until you step back from it, right? Until that noise stops and you realize that the silence that you've been avoiding is still there. Because external validation, it doesn't fix inner emptiness, right? It doesn't fix it at all or solve anything. It just covers it, right? It's like a blanket over a hole. It looks fine from above, but you'll fall straight through the moment life tests you. Trying to fill yourself with validation, external validation, is like it's like trying to pour water into a bucket with cracks in it, right? It'll hold for a moment and it might keep a little bit of the water for a little bit, but then it leaks and you end up chasing more and more and more without ever feeling full. And that's why this episode is called The Death of Validation. Because the version of you that keeps chasing approval cannot survive if you want to become the person you're meant to be. Okay, something has to die. Either your need for validation dies or your potential dies. You can't have both. And I promise you this. If there's one thing I can promise, it's this. Every strong, confident, grounded version of yourself that you dream about, that version can't exist if you're still performing for the world. So today's episode isn't about it's not about hating validation, okay? But it's about understanding why you can't build a strong identity on something that disappears the moment that people get bored. Okay? To become someone worth following, someone who leads, someone who doesn't crumble at the first sign of judgment, you have to bury your need to be seen. You have to learn to act quietly, right? Move quietly, grow quietly, and essentially detox from approval. And that's where we're going next, right? Most people think that validation addiction is a confidence issue, right? Like it's just insecurity, like you're insecure or shy or unsure of yourself, but it's way deeper than that. Approval addiction is always rooted in fear, right? Whether it's fear of not being enough, fear of not fitting in, fear of being misjudged, misunderstood, pushed away, fear of being alone with yourself and not liking the person that you meet there, right? When you depend on validation, you live in a constant state of choose me, right? Please choose me. And it's not super obvious, it's subtle, but it's everywhere in the way that you talk, the way that you present yourself, the people that you try to impress. It's a quiet tension that never goes away, and this sense that you're only allowed to exist if someone else approves it. And the worst part of it is that validation addiction doesn't make you feel seen. It makes you feel controlled. Because the moment that you rely on external validation, you hand the world the remote to your identity. Your mood, your confidence, your sense of worth, all one bad comment away from collapsing. You become someone who doesn't make decisions from truth, but rather fear. Okay? You start shape shifting into whatever you think that will make you liked or accepted, praised, or round of applause, whatever. And once you start shape shifting for approval, you lose yourself. You don't have a center anymore. You don't trust your own judgment. Every choice that you make, it becomes a negotiation with imaginary people in your head. Right? You're asking, what will they think? Will they like it? Will this make me look good enough? What will other people think of this? Will this make me be seen as less of X, Y, or Z, right? You're not living your life anymore. You're auditioning for it. And I speak from experience because approval addiction personally limited me for years. For a long time, I didn't realize that my happiness was dependent on other people. Okay? It didn't seem like it. It's not obvious. If you would have asked me back then if I had an approval addiction or that if my happiness was dependent on other people, I would have told you no. I would have told you that I was completely and utterly self-sufficient. But here's the thing, I didn't have internal grounding. If someone liked me, validated me, or complimented me, I felt that high. And if they didn't, I felt empty. Or at least a tug on that. And that emptiness wasn't a person like a it wasn't a personality flaw. It was the cost of outsourcing my self-worth. I didn't know who I was because I kept changing who I was depending on who was watching. And you can't build real confidence like that. You can't grow into a strong, grounded man like that. You will stay stuck in a fragile version of yourself, right? One wrong opinion away from collapsing. And the signs that you have, or just in general the signs of validation addiction, they're everywhere once you start noticing them. One that I noticed: constant phone checking, right? Refreshing the app, seeing if somebody viewed your story, rereading texts, right? To see if they liked what you said or if it was the right thing to say. Texting again, right? Double texting after someone ignores you, over explaining yourself to avoid misunderstanding, being overly careful and like middle ground with your opinions because you don't want anybody to be bothered, right? All of that can be validation seeking. And most people don't even realize that they're doing it. They think that they're being polite, thoughtful, or just careful. But really, they're afraid. They're afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being disliked, afraid of being alone with their own judgment. And there are emotional consequences of living like that. It's heavy. You have anxiety. It presents instability. It creates doubt, and it inflicts sadness on you. Right? This shaky, the shaky "I hope they like me" energy that follows you everywhere. That's the consequence. And that's the thing. When your identity is built on other people's opinions, it will never be able to stabilize. Okay, you're living inside of a house made of glass, and the world doesn't even have to touch you to break it, right? The wind alone is enough. Right? You can wake up confident at 9 in the morning and then shattered at 9:07, depending on who texts you back or who doesn't, depending on who liked your post or didn't, or how someone reacted to what you said. You essentially become emotionally homeless. You don't live in yourself, you live in everyone else. Approval addiction is not needing praise. Okay, it's needing permission. It's believing that you can't trust yourself until someone else kind of verifies that. And it's believing that your worth is something that the world's hand out like a grade or a test, right? And when you live like that, you never get to become the person that you're meant to be. Because everything that you build is designed for someone else's eyes. And to overcome approval addiction, you have to fully understand what it is, right? It's a fear-based habit that disconnects you from your own identity. It's a loop that keeps you small. It's a cycle that drains your power. And until you break that loop, you'll always be limited. You'll always be performing. You'll always be waiting for permission to be yourself. And so I kind of want to get into that next section. This leads us perfectly on how to break that validation loop and shift from external approval and needing that to internal grounding. So you can finally build a self that doesn't shake every time the world does, right? Every time the world blinks. And so let's start by saying this, right? I would be ignorant to ignore the fact that external validation feels good, right? It does. It does feel good in the moment. But internal validation feels real, right? External validation is like junk food, right? It's a quick hit, it's cheap dopamine, but it's empty calories, right? And that's the whole point. Internal validation is that full, savory, heavy meal, right? It actually fills you, okay? And it sustains you. And it keeps you grounded even long after that moment has passed. That's the difference. Okay? External validation will fade. It fades super fast. But internal validation actually stays for longevity. External validation needs and requires you to constantly refill it. But internal validation builds you into someone who doesn't need to be refilled, right? It doesn't need refilling. And I specifically learned that in the gym. That was the first, I would say real place that I ever experienced internal validation, right? Because nobody was watching me. Nobody was praising me. Nobody saw all of the reps, the sweat, the super early mornings, and all of the, the soreness, all of it. It it was private. It was personal. It was me showing up for me. I wasn't showing up for anybody else. And every time that I walked out of the gym, right? I remember when I was 15 years old, or yeah, around 15 or 16 when I had first been able to drive, and I got my first gym membership. I remember every time I walked out of that gym, I felt accomplished. Not because someone had validated me, clapped for me walking out, but because I showed myself who I could be. That is internal validation. It's the moment where you're like, where you think to yourself, I don't need anybody to see this for it to matter. And that's how you build real confidence in the dark, not the spotlight. Once you're able to do these things in private and not need other people to see it or even know about it for it to matter, that is how you can identify it as internal validation. External validation can never give you that, okay? And here's the hard truth that people need to hear. Nothing stable can be built on external validation. Okay, not your identity, not your confidence, not your purpose, not your life. If who you are is built on other people's approval, you don't have an identity, right? You have a performance, and a performance that can't protect you when life tests you. And that's why solitude matters. Solitude isn't loneliness, okay? Solitude is where you meet the parts of yourself that you've been running from. Okay, being alone forces you to face every single uncomfortable truth that you have been avoiding. It exposes those wounds that you've been covering with validation and dopamine, attention, distraction, all those things, right? You start noticing things that you ignored when the world was loud and when you were distracted, right? Why you might fear being alone, why silence feels scary, why you always reach for your phone and you're constantly checking it, right? Why you feel empty when nobody else is watching and you don't feel accomplished, right? When you're constantly surrounded by noise, and when I say noise, I mean like social media, other people's opinions, friends, just chaos in general, there's no space for clarity. Okay, it's like trying to see through a storm while running like full speed. Okay, everything's going to be blurry and loud and nothing really makes sense. But when you step back, when you sit alone, when you let the dust settle, that clarity finally shows up. Okay? Solitude is where the truth reveals itself. Okay? It's where your real thoughts speak and where your real identity merges. It's where the noise from the outside world dies and that signal finally comes through for your real internal grounding. And people misunderstand solitude because they confuse it with punishment. Okay, they think that being alone means being unloved or unwanted or unworthy. They kind of group together all these kinds of titles and descriptions, but solitude is the birthplace of confidence. Okay, solitude is the training ground for self respect. Solitude is where leaders are formed because when you sit alone long enough and you're by yourself with nobody else around you, you start hearing a voice that you've ignored for years. Okay, and that's your own. That inner voice, you ever heard of that inner voice that people like to run from or people don't like to hear? It's not weak and it's not stupid. And this is the most important one, it's not your enemy. Okay? It's the truth that you've been avoiding because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Most people silence that voice with validation. I know I did, right? They can silence it with noise or distractions, right? Because that voice whispers the things that they don't want to admit. And it reveals every single insecurity and all the fears and patterns they don't want to break and wounds that they haven't healed yet. And facing that, let's be honest, it takes courage. It takes courage that most people don't have because they've spent years depending on external approval to make them feel okay. But here's the thing, until you're able to sit alone with your truth, you'll always be dependent on other people's lies. Okay, solitude strips you bare, right? It forces you to see what's real. It forces your hand to see who you actually are when nobody is validating you, when no one's cheering you on or clapping or liking things and validating you. And when you can stand in that version of yourself, that's when you finally become unshakable. Internal validation, right, is clarity. External validation is noise. Okay, and the more time that you spend alone, and I mean actually alone, the more that you realize this, your inner voice was never the enemy. It never was. Okay? You just drowned it out because you were scared of its honesty. So if you want to reclaim your identity, okay, your direction, your confidence, you have to break the external loop. You have to trade noise for silence. And you have to choose solitude long enough for your real self to speak, long enough for your real self to poke through and show itself and uncover itself from all of the fake noise that you've been putting on top of it. Because only when the world quiets down do you finally hear the voice that knows exactly who you're meant to become. And so that leads us into the final section, the challenge, right? How you actually kill your need to be seen so you can finally walk through the world as someone who doesn't hope to be enough but knows they are, right? And so here's the thing about validation, right? It keeps you weak, keeps you dependent and disconnected from yourself and performing instead of living. And at some point, you have to make a decision. Are you going to keep chasing approval like a dog chasing the mailman, right? Or are you going to build something within yourself that doesn't fall apart every time someone looks at you the wrong way? Okay? Your need to be seen by others is the same thing that's keeping you from becoming someone worth seeing. And that's why this episode is called The Death of Validation. Because something really does have to die. Part of you that asks the world for permission, right? The part of you that checks your phone every 10 minutes hoping that someone has decided that you're worthy today or shows that you're worthy. The part of you that changes who you are depending on who's in the room and how you act. That version of you can't survive if you want to become the person that you're capable of being. Okay, so here's the real bare truth. Approval addiction is not just a bad habit, okay? It's a cage. It's a place, right? And the longer that you stay in it, the more you forget what freedom feels like. Right? But the moment that you step out of it, the moment that you let your validation die, your identity will start to breathe again. And your mind will get stronger, and your intuition will get clearer, and your confidence will grow from the inside out instead of the outside in. Because you're no longer living for an applause from others. You're living for alignment for yourself. So here's your challenge, okay? And I want you to take this seriously. As I say every episode, right? I want you to take these seriously and do something important quietly. I don't want you to do it for the internet. Don't do it for your friends. Not for attention. For you. Okay, do something meaningful that no one sees, okay? No bragging, no posting, no hinting at it, no telling others, no, look at me, whatever. It's just you and the task and the truth that comes from showing yourself who you are without anyone else's eyes on you. Right? It might be going to the gym without posting it, right? It might be blocking someone you crave validation from. Or removing that temptation. It might be sitting alone in silence for 20 minutes and facing your own thoughts. It might be starting something that you've postponed because you were afraid of how people would view it, right? Whatever it is, it could be a plethora of things that you could do. Do it quietly and feel what it's like to validate yourself from the inside. Because the version of you who doesn't need to be seen is the version that becomes unshakable, unstoppable, deeply grounded in themselves. So let the old you die, right? Let the approval seeker die. Let the version of you that needed applause die. So the real you, the confident you, the self-led you, the aligned you, so that you can finally live. So this is the self-discovery files, and today's file is super simple, okay? You'll never lead your life if you can't walk alone. Thanks for listening to the Self-Discovery Files. My name is Dylan Phipps. Keep showing up for yourself, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep becoming who you're meant to be.